Hey, thanks for joining us for part two of my podcast. We're going to be joining Greg from Digital Pixel Cafe again. In this episode, or a continuation of, we will be discussing console upgrades and also 4K TV and kind of discuss maybe the benefits or non benefit of the upgrades in general and go over a little bit of hardware numbers. When they did bring the 1080p, at the time, because I had a launch console and mine lasted much longer than it should have. I was actually playing Gears of War 3 when it died, so kind of give
Wow,
you a
that's
hint
crazy.
of, yeah. So the launch console I had lasted a long time, and I was using component. However, you got to remember the various models when they had come out with the revision to kind of fix the GPU problem. They added HDMI to it,
Yep, that's what I have.
and that was the Elite, I think, that originally come out, like the Falcon board or something.
hmm
And then they, each revision, things just kept getting better and better and more reliable and whatever. But you're right, they like 1080p, you didn't really actually get any games that did 1080p like natively unless they were like,
Like arcade games and stuff.
well, or small, maybe platformers or
That's
something,
what I'm saying. Like
puzzle
the
games.
like back when Xbox Live Arcade was a thing,
Yeah,
like Geometry Wars and stuff would
yeah, or
push
stuff
the
like that.
resolution, but and there's a few reasons I'm thinking that this is actually going to be the case because for one, it's perfect marketing that Sony's not going to pass up. Just imagine PlayStation 4K. I mean, it just kind of rolls, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I was kind of thinking. I
um,
don't think it's gonna be 4.5. That's kind of
That's
dumb.
yeah, that's dumb. Calling it
Um,
PlayStation 4K makes it sound like it's a 4K beast or something. But here's a couple things that I thought of, and this is why I don't think that it's going to be a true 4K gaming machine. Um, First of all, have you looked at the price of these true 4K Blu-ray players? Not the 4K upscalers. The
no, the
4K,
UHD Blu-ray
yeah,
4,
like the
whatever.
true
Yeah, they're like
4K.
800 bucks or something right
They're
now.
at 400. They had at CES. I want to say it was Sony maybe that had one for $400 or Samsung.
Samsung has one. Um,
There was
the
one other
one
company that had one at CES that was a similar price. I want to say
Toshiba, I think, has one too.
it might be, but those prices are insane, and those don't include like PlayStation 4 hardware by a long shot. So
Yeah,
that
and
means
if
you know
they release a revised PS4, whether they call it 4K or not, um, upscaling to 4K, and there are some nice tricks you can do. I mean, for instance, look at Quantum Break.
yeah,
When you have your Xbox One set to 1080p, it's gonna output at 1080p, but you're getting a 720p picture that's upscaled,
exactly.
but it's intelligently upscaled. And of course, Remedy done they did some other tricks too to kind of soften up the jaggies a bit, and I guess they're using 4x. I don't know which version of anti-aliasing, but they're using it, and it for me, I think it looks pretty good. And you're looking on your computer screen on YouTube, you're not going to really see what it looks like until it's on your TV.
Right.
But also, if there's upscaling to 4K, um, the pixels are much smaller, and a lot of these new 4K TVs have like excellent up conversion methods.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I was a little worried about getting 4K for a long time because all my game consoles are 1080p max. So I was kind
Well,
of worried
I
that
would say
my
most
shiny
of them are
mhm,
what 480i or less.
that see that's what caused me to worry is when I first got a 1080p TV and I hooked like my original Xbox or PS2 to it running in 480p, it looked just awful. Like it was just so I don't know, it was just ugly as hell. And so I was kind of worried that was going to happen with my 1080p consoles if I got 4K. Well, lo and behold, I hooked my PS4 to it and my Wii U and stuff, and everything looks just as fantastic as it did on my 1080 display. Like, it doesn't feel to me like any noticeable downgrade whatsoever.
Well, I've seen, at least on Sony's 4K sets, I've seen Blu-rays played on it, and of course they're upscaled to the 4K. And I tell you what, I thought it looked better than 1080p. It
Yeah,
looked it looked really good. I don't know what the heck they're doing, but it looked really good, and I was very surprised. Um, so it's crazy, but so I'm thinking also about the NX here. Um, do you think that it's going to have in some way 4K output?
no, I firmly do not, because Nintendo does not. They don't care about that. The device will likely do Netflix and stuff, but it's absolutely not gonna do like. It's not gonna do. It's not gonna play 4K Blu-rays whatsoever. It's not gonna play Blu-rays at all. Um, it's almost a guarantee. And that's assuming it even has an optical drive. Like, we talked about this in the last podcast we did. Like, it might be those like 3DS style carts for all we know. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't think that the NX is gonna have it at all in terms of 4K. I really don't. We'll see. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe Nintendo's turned a new leaf, but traditionally they don't really push that stuff.
No, actually, traditionally, if you look at every single console they've had, they have been, with the exception of the GameCube, they have been essentially in last place when it comes to power.
In some senses. I actually did some research last night on this exact topic, because I think when you're talking about console hardware being upgraded, that it's important to look at what the upgraded consoles were competing with. And going back to the Super Nintendo, actually, I actually came up with the specs for the Genesis and the Super Nintendo to see how they compared. In terms of overall spec, the SNES was in ways worse than the Genesis. Take for example, the CPU in the Genesis was 7.6 megahertz, a whole 7.6. Um, and while the Super Nintendo was like 3.5 megahertz, so it was like half the speed of the Genesis. But look at the games,
Yeah.
and then it also had more RAM. Like the SNES had 128 kilobits of RAM, whereas the Genesis only had 72 kilobits. And I
Well,
do mean to say kilobits for all those listeners out there who don't understand how small bits are. That's literally what it is, bits.
well, I do know that the Super Nintendo had the Super FX chip,
In some
and
games.
yeah, towards the end of the lifespan, and that essentially, there's two reasons why it was developed, and you could kind of call it a console upgrade. I mean, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, cartridges led you, or gave you that option,
Yes.
and uh, so you had the ill-fated Sony Nintendo deal that went wrong
Yeah.
with the which
PlayStation.
that thing would have given Nintendo a huge edge. However, that went
Maybe.
south. Well, it was going to have extra graphics power that would have rivaled the 32X, which was kind of why uh,
Mm-hmm.
Nintendo wanted. They were thinking, oh man, they're at 32-bit with an add-on. It's going to sell really well, and of course it didn't.
Nope. Um.
But the big thing is the deal falls flat. Nintendo comes up with a better idea, and that's to put a essentially expansion CPU in the cartridge.
Yep.
And I know that Star Fox 60 or Star Fox, yeah, Star Fox used it.
Yep.
I think Mario Kart used it.
Mario Kart did not. That was just That was Mode 7, which the SNES
Oh,
could do.
yeah,
natively,
Um, I
but
do know that
Stunt Race FX did.
Donkey Kong Country.
Donkey Kong Country did not use the FX chip. It used what Rare called ACM, which was Advanced Computer Modeling, where they basically took 3D renders and turned them into sprites.
Well,
It had its own thing. It was its own technology, similar to FX, but it was different.
The Genesis had blast processing.
Yeah, that was just a sweet tagline. But the SNES also had, like, Capcom made their own chip too that was used for actually a couple chips that were used in the Mega Man X games and Street Fighter games and stuff like that.
I never had the Super Nintendo.
That's a shame.
I never.
Well,
pretty much every game that came out for that, I never played.
that's a shame.
And I'm not really big with emulators, so I never even downloaded those.
Well, I went and I had to ask myself when I was thinking about this topic: are upgrades even a good idea? Because looking at the past, and I know this is like 20 years ago or whatever, 25.
Yeah, but if you think about it, every machine that has done it, with the exception of PC,
it doesn't succeed. It's not successful. Going back to the Sega Genesis, it infamously had 2 hardware add-ons. And I got some sales numbers in front of me. The Genesis sold a total of 30 million units in its lifetime. Considered a success for the time, obviously.
Oh, that's a huge success. I mean, I would say that even today it's a success, but...
Well, that's calling the Wii U a success, so I don't know.
Well...
Almost a success.
The thing is, though, you got to look at the price, too. And
it is a different time, and the demographic was smaller.
Like yes, because now what you have is, the people who played those machines, which were, they were mostly kids. They were us. Well, now us, or at least our generation, has kids, and guess what? They're playing games too.
Yep.
So that's why the numbers are so big. But back then, most kids still played outside and whatever, causing mischief, whereas you and I, we were probably inside playing Castlevania.
Yep. Definitely. Well, here's the thing. I did some comparisons between how much those add-ons and those hardware upgrades sold for these other systems. Just put this into perspective. 30 million total Genesis units were sold. And for the Sega CD, which was the first big hardware upgrade for the system, sold 2.24 million units total. So minuscule compared to the overall install base. 32X was even worse than that.
I had one.
Yeah. Well, you're one of the 665,000 people that bought one. Not even 1 million. Now, we all know that the Genesis failed with these add-ons because Sega was stupidly launched the Saturn like 6 months after the 32X. And
actually, they launched it at the same time.
Well, in Japan.
But see, that's the thing. Like the United States got the 32X and Japan got the Saturn, and that's really where their problem was. It's like, what the hell?
Well, then it was actually in November, 32X came out, November of 94. Then in May, it was the first E3 ever, I believe, of 95. Sega was on stage, and they were like, surprise, the Saturn's out today. So it was like 6 months after the 32X.
And that's kind of funny because Apple does that shit on stage and people go nuts.
I know. It's
and
really
they buy
funny.
the shit out of their products.
How the times have changed, right?
Also, it's just popped in my head. When I had that 32X, when I was younger, I liked to take things apart, look at it and everything, and just kind of just marvel at how they put it together.
Hmm.
Well, I remember that it had two Hitachi SH2 chips.
Yeah.
Well, the Dreamcast has a Hitachi SH4. So if
Yeah.
you think about it, that 32X has a variant. It kind of led its way into the Dreamcast,
Yep.
in a way.
I have these. I have those specs all in my notes here. This is really funny because those a 32X does have two SH2 chips, and they're both 32-bit, and they run at 23 megahertz. Now the Saturn has the same exact chip, except for it runs at 28.6 megahertz, and it also has two of them. So it's kind of interesting when you look at it because the 32X was actually very similar in that respect to what their quote unquote next gen console was going to be. Um, on In regards to like RAM and stuff, it falls short of what the Saturn ended up being, but
It had the
um,
cartridge though, and
it
that's the
did.
thing. It's like they could just if they wanted, they could have put memory right on the cartridge.
Yep. Now I went and just this is obviously not entirely accurate, but I just decided to take all the Genesis add-ons and the Genesis itself and kind of combine specs just to get a rough idea of what kind of specs it had compared to the Saturn and even the PlayStation. It's actually compared to the Super Nintendo, the Genesis CD and 32X combined was a beast of a machine. If anybody ever used it.
Hey, thanks for listening to part two. Please check out part three and possibly part four. And don't forget to subscribe and like or share or whatever, or don't. It's your choice. And again, thanks for checking it out.